Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to watch today's video. Always very happy to have you guys around the channel here. Today guys, I want to talk about how to find the secret spots on a public body of water or some place that gets a lot of fishing pressure, because secret spots are hard to find now. It's like it wasn't like that years ago. There was a ton of secret spots, especially before the advent of GPS mapping and that type of deal. But now they're a lot harder to find, but they're still out there. You can still find these subtle places that get overlooked, that I call them secret spots. So I want to give you guys some tips and advice on how to identify that and sort of get away from the pressure that is so difficult to get around in today's world of fishing there. Also, guys, before we get started, a couple quick daily housekeeping things there. I just want to give everybody a huge thank you that puts up with all my plugs here and uses that Tackle Warehouse link it's in my video description. Guys, if you're one of the viewers that have just bookmarked that link of mine anytime you order tackle, thank you very much, man. You guys are really helping the channel out. We really appreciate that, me and my family. Thank you for ordering one of my Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns in the description. And finally, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, just go to my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, and shoot me a private message for details and get y'all set up with that. Appreciate it. Okay, man, this is what I used to look for all the time. It's because I've always been one of those anglers that I don't want to see another person when I'm fishing. I want everything alone. I don't want to see a car. I don't want to hear a sign of civilization. I don't want to see another boat. So I spent a lot of time trying to find these secret, hard to reach areas. And I did for many, many years, especially before GPS. Because what I would do is I would get a lake map, and I'd look at all the creeks that came into the lake, and I would try to find creeks that I could get my boat back into that nobody else would want to tear their boat up, or they didn't think they could get in there. And I spent a lot of time, guys. I would pull up to the back of the creek where it was real shallow, and I would get out of the boat and I'd walk the bank and I'd fish the backs end of these creeks off the bank because they were hard to get a boat in. And then I'd try to figure out how to get my boat in there by digging a trench or just cutting down, trees that were across the creek with chainsaw, whatever, trying to find these places, and it paid off. But now those type of areas just aren't near as productive. And what I want to talk about today is how to identify areas on a lake that do not get very much fishing pressure that are really good areas. And this takes a little bit more creativity than it ever has, because they're a lot harder than what people think they are. Okay, there's not just one way to do this. There's several ways that you can do it. First of all, it's sort of like it's a secret area in plain sight is what I call it, are places that are too much effort to go to fish and maybe make one or two casts. In other words, let's say that, you're, fishing down an area that looks really good, and you're on one side of a creek of the lake, and you've got some nice docks and lay down trees, and you got nice looking riprap bank, really fishy looking stuff. And then maybe on the other side of the creek, there's a nothing looking bank over there that's just a flat bank with no cover on it. But maybe there's one log in the water or something like that. Or there's maybe a stick sticking out of the water, or maybe there's a pipe sticking out of the water. One piece of cover. One of the things that you have to look at or realize is when the average angler sees that, one piece of cover on a nothing looking bank, the first thing they say is I'm not going to go over there just to fish one stick. And guys, that is one of those areas in plain sight that is the secret area. If you look at a piece of cover and it comes to your mind, it's that's not worth it to go over there. That's not worth my time to go over there to make 2 or 3 casts around that one spot. That's when you need to go over there and make 2 or 3 casts around that one spot, because those are the areas that do not get fished. I mean, those are inobvious type places in plain sight that people just do not mess with fishing. One of my most favorite secret type of areas, guys, is if you're fishing on a good looking area like that, and then say there's a one boat dock on an entire bank. Most people will never go over and hit that dock, and most of the time an individual lone dock like that can be a gold mine. Okay, another thing, here's another way to identify a secret area. If you're, say for example, you launch your boat at the at the launch ramp where you're at. You know, say it's a pretty active public use area. When you start running down the lake or up the lake, or just you're running away from that area, most of the time people hug one side of the lake over another side. So say for example, if you're wanting to run, say this ramp is in the mid part of the lake, and say you're wanting to run up the lake to start fishing. So you come out of the creek and you turn left to go up the lake. Most people are going to run like that. They're going to come up, they're going to come out of the launch ramp, they're going to make a left to go up the lake, and they stay on the left-hand bank. But if you make that left going up the lake, not a lot of people run to the other side of the lake to start going up at the lake. They try to take the shortest route to where they're wanting to go. Those longer routes are secret areas. So in other words, let's say for example, we've got a boat ramp in the mid part of the lake, and if you take out of that, say the ramp's back in a cove, and you come out of this cove, and if you go to the right, you can go down to the dam. If you go to the left, you can go up the river arm of the lake, the upper end of the lake. If you go left, most of the people are going to stay on that left-hand bank. If you go right, most of the people are going to stay on that right-hand bank. They're not going to run all the way across the lake to try to get down the lake or up the lake. So the first thing you want to do to identify some good secret spots is when you take a left to go up the river, go across the lake to the right-hand bank. Or if you go right to go to the dam, go across to the other side of the lake on the left-hand bank. And those are the areas of a lake that do not get as much fishing pressure. They still get fish, don't get me wrong, but when you're talking about a heavily pressured lake, they simply don't get that much fishing pressure. It's sort of like a blind spot in a lake. That's one of the areas you need to look for. Okay, the next thing that you need to look for, another good type of a secret type spot, is if you get on, say you're back in a creek or a cove arm, and most creek or cove arms, you've got like a steep side and a flat side. And most of the time, one side of the creek or cove looks better than the other. It's got more cover on it, or it just looks better. Go to the nothing looking banks, the banks that look like there's no fish there. And once you get to those type of areas, go off of those areas and look for any type of a subtle drop off. So let's say, for example, you've got this flat looking, nothing looking bank that's pea gravel. There's no cover on the bank anywhere. But if you, and it's flat coming off it, a lot of times if you get on those flat looking nothing banks and you'll see, say the water stays 4 or 5, like it stays 5 feet deep forever, then all of a sudden it breaks off subtly to maybe like 5 to 8 feet. It doesn't have to take much, just a 2 or 3 foot little drop within like a 10-foot section. That can be a secret gold mine. The little bitty subtle drops on those flat banks like that, guys, I have caught a ton of fish on it. I won the Central Pro-Am Titleist tournament down at Table Rock Lake several years ago. That's exactly what I did. I got on those nothing looking flat banks, and I looked for those very subtle drop offs, and I caught them on a deep diving crankbait, cranking those very little, I'm talking about drops that were just 2 or 3 feet. Everybody else would run past it. They never think twice about looking at it. So that's a really good thing with it. Another really secret spot has to do with boat docks. If you have a lake that has a lot of boat docks in it, and you've got a lot of options to fish with that, pay attention to any type of brush that has been planted on the inside part of the dock by the walkway. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but a lot of times on some of those docks there, if the water's low, you'll notice like some brush piles that have been planted, or you'll see some limbs like around the walkway areas. And most people do not take time to go back and look at the walkway area of a dock, especially if there's a lot of docks on a bank, because you have to fight the cables and you have to go in and it's tight, and then you have to fight your way out. So most people, when they fish docks, they stay on the sides and the outside. They don't go back and fight those cables to get back in there. But if you go back in there and start focusing on those areas behind those walkways, behind the boat cables, those are secret areas. People do not fish those type of areas very much because they don't want to take the time. They don't want to scratch their boat up. Look for any type of irregular cover around those walkway areas. Steel pipes are another one, guys. That's one of my favorite little secret deals, is like if you can find some metal pipes coming off the dock or coming out of the water around those walkways, that can be money. Don't ever pass that up. And finally, those hard to access areas. Now, this is sort of my deal, my favorite thing like here. What you're going to have in a lot of lakes across the country, especially as our lakes get older, is the creek arms start to get silted in the back parts of the creek. So after year of floods and high water and low water, you have a lot of sediment and siltation that come down a river arm. And a lot of times the part where the river of a lake opens up into the lake, that's where most of the silt is deposited. And a lot of times there's so much silt there that you can't go any farther back in the creek. But if you go farther back in the creek, the original creek channel has deep water in it, but you can't access that because of the siltation where it comes into the main part of the lake. If you can figure out how to get back in those areas over those silted in shallow flats, that's some of the best fishing you're going to have. And those are truly secret areas that people don't mess with unless you have like a jet boat or a small boat. But a lot of times, if you go back into those areas that's been silted in, there might be a little bitty route back in there that's just a little bit deeper that you can put your trolling motor down, trim your motor up, and troll over it with your trolling motor and get back in there. That's one of my big secrets that's been forever. Guys, I have won tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, fishing like that, back in those siltation type areas, getting over that shallow water. But the main thing, guys, if I could give you one just tip on this whole thing, is when you're on the water and you're down the lake, try to have the mindset that's like 180 degrees of what would be considered normal. Fish the areas that look crappy. Fish the areas that you think that nobody are going to mess the fish with. Fish the areas that do not look visibly appealing, because a lot of times bass will use those areas simply to get away from the fishing pressure, even if the cover's not there. So what I'm talking about, if you've got a cove or a creek that has one side is awesome looking, gets a lot of cover on it, looks perfect, and you got another side that doesn't look very good at all, 99% of the anglers are going to go to the good looking spots, and they get heavily fished, and the fish are heavily pressured there. There may be more fish there, but they're heavily pressured and harder to catch. Where if you go on the nothing looking bank, the crappy looking bank, there may not be as many fish there, but they may be more active and more aggressive, so don't ever pass that up. So anyway, guys, hope it helps you catch a few, and we'll talk later.